Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. We're talking Canada US border security with Vashi on CCB News. And with no further ado, let's get into it.
Tonight with something Trump's new border czar is saying in a local TV interview in the United States. Tom Homan is singling out Canada, saying he plans to deal with what he calls an extreme national security vulnerability along our shared border. Have a listen.
In my 34 years, a lot of SIAs, special interest aliens, from countries that sponsor terror or are known not to be our friends, come through the northern border because they're an organization that have a lot of money, and they can afford to fly into Canada to come across that northern border because they know a lot fewer officers up here. In Thousand Islands, you can cross St. Lawrence River in 45 seconds. So it's an extreme national security vulnerability on the northern border, and it's one of the things I'll tackle.
Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc oversees Canada's border. He's also the vice chair of this federal government's new U.S. Relations Committee. Hi, Minister. It's good to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Vashi.
Is our border with the U.S., the Americans' northern border, as Donald Trump's new border czar has just described it, a, quote, huge national security issue?
I don't think so. I think we work successfully with the Americans over decades to manage this large, long undefended border. I'm briefed regularly, and as recently as this morning, by the Commissioner of the RCMP, Border Services, CSIS, on some of the preparations that are always undertaken at the border. I have a lot of confidence in their work, and they do it with their American partners, but we'll work very constructively with the incoming administration, as we always have. I'm confident that this can be managed very successfully.
Mr. Homan points in his interview that he gave, where that quote is derived from, to the issue of human smuggling through Canada into the U.S. And there is some data that objectively supports the idea that there is an issue. And that data shows basically that more than 19,000 people in the so-called Swanton sector area, basically the border at Vermont, New York, and northern New Hampshire, in a 12-month span, ending October 2nd, that's how many people crossed. That's more than were apprehended through the same area over the previous 17 years combined. What is your government doing to address that?
So, and you're right to identify, Vashi, a challenge that we've been working on for many months now. The reimposition, for example, of visas on flights on persons arriving directly from Mexico is a big deal. My colleague, the Minister of Immigration, made some changes, around visas for people coming, for example, from India. Much of this traffic is persons that come to Canada and then make their way to the border. So we're in the process of tightening up and have tightened up. Those numbers have come down, but we're going to continue to do the work that we need to do. Immigration Canada and Border Services are very much involved in that, and so are the RCMP.
So can you be a little bit more specific when you say?
Yeah, that's craziness. You would never think that they'd come to Canada and then go down through the border into the States, because first off, you'd need to fly all the way to Canada. Even like if you're from Mexico, you're going to need a passport. So meaning once you land here in Canada, you're going to have to go through the border from Canada to the United States, and you're going to have to show your passport there. Why wouldn't you just go through the southern border through Mexico? That would sound a lot easier than taking 2 flights to try and get down through there. But I don't know how this stuff works, so I'm just speculating the hoops, the easier ways. So
Say those numbers have come down because, again, Mr. Homan was specifically pointing to that issue, saying that over the year, there has been a big increase. I take your point on the visa requirement for Mexico, and that it did make a discernible difference when it came to Mexicans who were trying to move into the U.S. But what happened is that India, in particular, basically supplanted that, and so the increase kept going. Are things really improving? Because I don't see any data to support that position.
Yeah, I think they are. And Mark Miller updated our Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. relations again today. In terms of some of the visa measures that his department has taken with respect to persons coming from India. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we have done a lot of work, but we'll continue to do, Vashi, what's necessary to bring these numbers down. One of the great things about the Canada-U.S. relationship is its resiliency. It's been that way for decades. It's one of the closest partnerships that two countries can have. But we totally understand Canadians' determination to ensure that the border continues to be secure. Canada absolutely wants to be in a position to decide who comes into our country. And the United States obviously has exactly the same objective. So we'll work with them in partnership because it is a north-south circumstance. But I'm very confident. The president of the Border Services Agency today told me about conversations she's having with the leaders of the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. I'm quite confident that this will be managed very effectively.
So why hasn't it already, though, to be blunt, Minister? Why are the numbers continuing to increase at a record pace if, in fact, as you contend, it is being managed?
Yeah, when there's such a mass amount of people coming into our country at one time through our borders, that means that there's an issue, and government really hasn't been telling us what the issue is and why this is happening. We all know that why it's happening, and we don't have enough people at our border. Our government is highly incompetent when it comes to this sort of thing, let's just say. And if anybody does come to the border, the RCMP kind of just escorts them in. So it is what it is.
Well, it is being managed, and this is a global challenge, Vashi. The United States is facing similar challenges also, but we totally accept our responsibility in terms of ensuring that the visa requirements, the immigration rules are in place, that people who come to Canada lawfully, we expect people to come to Canada through regular pathways to follow the law. There are many ways for them to come to Canada. But trying to submit a visa application when your intention is to try and illegally cross into the United States is obviously not an acceptable circumstance. So the Immigration Department has a number of ways to bring that down. And CBSA and the RCMP are patrolling. I went with the RCMP late this summer to see in the eastern townships of Quebec a number of installations they have in place to catch exactly this context of human smuggling. The commissioner of the RCMP tells me that he's going to be ramping up and reaffecting different resources as the needs arise. I'm confident that Mike Duhem will be in a position between regular border crossings to ensure the RCMP do the job that Canadians expect them to do. And if they need more resources, we're going to give them more resources.
I want to push you on that because I want to be clear that those resources are available. Because here's what the Quebec head of the RCMP has said very recently about that border.
See, later the Liberals go and try to not take accountability for their actions. They're saying that this is a global problem and it's not just Canada. But then after saying that, but we take responsibility. Hey, Canadians don't care that in the UK or in Germany or somewhere else they're having the same issue. What are you doing? All we care about is what are you doing to prevent this in our country? That's all we care about. We don't care about your excuses. And that's all I'm hearing right now. And when he talks about visas and stuff like that, okay, but the people who are getting visas and coming to Canada, they're not the people that we're talking about here. They're the people who don't have visas in the United States fleeing Trump into Canada. That's what we're worried about.
And what's happening when it pertains to human smuggling. They intercept an average of more than 100 people per week on the Canadian side of the border. And Mr. Poirier said that's only a portion of those headed to the U.S. Surely 19,000 people a year to you is not acceptable. And further to the patrol of that area, what about the CBSA? They say they're 2,000 people short along the border to do the job that is expected of them.
Well, again, that's the union representing CBSA employees that said that. That's not the position of the senior executives that run the CBSA. The CBSA has very effective controls at recognized border crossings. The RCMP are responsible, as you know, Vashi, between the 136, I think, recognized or standing border crossings from one end of the country to the other. But I've said to Commissioner Duhem in a meeting today that I expected by the end of this week, early next week, that he would do an inventory of any additional resources he needs. Is it technology, equipment, to show Canadians that we're doing the job that they expect us to do. I think we should have a lot of confidence that they'll do that job effectively, but they'll do it in partnership with the American authorities, Vashi.
But again, with all due respect, Minister, if that job was being done effectively, would 19,000 people be crossing illegally into the U.S. and arrested on that side of the border a year? Like, why aren't you looking at those resources 6 months ago and saying, let's add more now? You had to know this possibility. This hard line taken by Donald Trump was a potential, at least.
Totally. And that preparation, as you properly noted, has been ongoing for many months. So some of the...
And why aren't the numbers going down, respectfully?
They will. They will come down, Vashi. They will come down. The changes to the Safe Third Country Agreement were also, we think, very important. People who enter Canada illegally will be turned around and returned to the United States. That's exactly what a Safe Third Country Agreement does. The United States government, including President Trump in his first term in office, were very much in favor of amending the Safe Third Country Agreement to deal with these irregular crossings. So the conversations that I've had with American authorities, and that I know that senior law enforcement and national security agencies are having with their American counterparts, is how to make that operationally the most effective possible. They're turning around a lot of people.
So let me ask you then, looking ahead.
Though, weren't those implemented a year ago, all of those extra visa standards and agreements? Why are the numbers still going up? Yes, we're catching a lot more people at the border because of them, which is awesome. I'm not taking back at that, but why are we still having an increase in people being caught at the border? That's the issue here.
Head a little bit, because the human smuggling is one issue, the north to south is one issue, the potential for south to north is another. And I listened to your scrum last week in which you were asked, because of Trump's promise to enact the greatest deportation, the largest scale deportation, as he calls it, ever in the history of the United States on day one, like the potential for south to north. And I
just listening to Vashi say that, and not in a Trump voice, sounds so weird. Because that's such a Trump thing to say. You just always expect it in his voice.
You were saying at the time that you're not worried about a massive rush to the border. I wanted to know specifically from you what your message is to people who are deported from the United States, because it was back in 2017 with the so-called Muslim travel ban when the Prime Minister very specifically tweeted out a message of welcome to people who were seeking refuge from persecution. He got a lot of flack for that. There was a lot of criticism about the potential tie between that and the number of people seeking refuge through irregular points of entry into Canada. What is your message tonight to people who may be caught up in that deportation?
So I said last week, and I still believe it's true, that the RCMP and Border Services Agency have contingency plans in place that will deal with any one of these eventualities. They're refining those plans as they get intelligence, including from American partners. So that work is ongoing, but has been ongoing for many months. I think my colleague Mark Miller said it very well earlier this week. Not everyone is welcome to come to Canada in an irregular pathway. There are many lawful, regular ways for people to visit Canada or to come to Canada. If you come to Canada outside one of those lawful pathways, you will be turned around and sent back to the United States. You'll be apprehended and sent to the United States. Everybody who arrives at a border crossing or is apprehended, there'll be biometric screening done. If there are any concerns around criminality or any of those issues, those people will be detained and they'll be deported. So I'm quite confident that we have the regulatory and lawful framework in place, and we have the RCMP and the Border Services Agency that do this work every day now. But as you noted, if in some circumstance there's a surge that takes place. They will have the resources to manage that surge and to deal with these eventualities.
Why is your message so different now than it was?
See, I'm wondering if, and this is just a kind of crazy idea here, we should order up a lot of those Boston Dynamics dogs and just have them go across the border with sensors, like patrol back and forth with cameras and sensors and all of that. So if somebody tries to enter through an illegal crossing, then we'll have somebody who can pick them up. I wonder if that could work. I don't know.
It was back in 2017. How do you account for that to Canadians?
Well, I wasn't the public safety minister in 2017.
Your government's message was not what you're saying tonight.
But Vashi, there's a global circumstance that we've seen over the last number of years. Canada is not alone in facing this challenge. I was at a G7 interior ministers meeting in Italy a few weeks ago, and you can imagine our European partners talking about irregular migration, and particularly the Italian minister with whom I spent some time. But Canada needs to, as it's always done, step up to ensure the integrity of our border. That's what Canadians expect us to do. Canadians expect us to be a welcoming country, but that people come here lawfully. They come here in many of the generous pathways that exist. Those that choose not to respect the lawful way to come to Canada will face the consequences.
Do you see the
including removal?
Pardon the interruption, but do you see how Canadians might have a hard time believing that, given the numbers that we've talked about throughout this entire program so far, given the increase in asylum seekers, given the tweet from the Prime Minister back in 2017? Is it understandable that Canadians might have a hard time believing the message you're delivering this evening?
I hope not. I think they should look at what we're doing around immigration detention in terms of legislative measures. They should look at what the Border Services Agency is doing in terms of removing those that are unlawfully in Canada. They should look at changes we've made with respect to visas that the Immigration Department has made. We're going to evolve all of these measures, Vashi, as is needed. And these measures will be tough and fair, but people need to understand that it's simply not a sort of an open buffet. If you want to come to Canada in a series of illegal or irregular ways, you'll face Canadian law enforcement that, according to law, will take the measures necessary to remove people.
Okay, I'm going to leave it.
Well, there you go, folks. It's a totally different message than what came in 2016, 2017, when Trudeau first sent out his tweet to welcome everybody who is escaping Donald Trump. Canada will welcome you. Unfortunately, I couldn't find that tweet online, but here up next, I got a news article for you about some of the things the border czar said about the issues we might have at our border. So from DH Canada, Trump border czar calls Canadian border a huge national security issue. The border czar, recently appointed by the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, says that the Canadian border is a huge national security issue he plans to address when the new administration takes over. In an interview with YYNW that aired on Monday, Tom Hallman, the incoming president's former acting U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) director, said that Trump must work with Prime Minister Trudeau to enforce stricter immigration laws. And let's just hope that that is actually possible. He said that there are a lot of special interest aliens, which are people from other countries that the U.S. deems as a national security or counterintelligence threat, come through the Canada-U.S. border. He says, it's an extreme national security vulnerability at our northern border, and it's one of those things he'll tackle. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol agents in the Swanton sector have apprehended more than 19,222 people from 97 countries since October of last year. They also said earlier in this week, CBS reported that illegal crossings in the northern U.S. border, specifically along eastern New York, Vermont, Ontario, and Quebec, have continued to skyrocket. The Border Patrol agents in the Swanton sector, we already read that. They also go on to say, Haman told WWNY, that the Trump administration must put more Border Patrol agents in the north and also needs to end catch and release, which is a U.S. immigration enforcement practice. So, U.S. apparently at the northern border is having, or their northern border is having the same issue too. So, it seems like it will be a joint venture, let's just say, but I can't particularly see from people fleeing the U.S. into Canada, anyways, I can't see the U.S. agents stopping them. It'll have to be our RCMP, and hopefully the minister does do what he says, and he will provide our border agencies the men and equipment that they need and everything that they need, because I think when Trump says that on day one there's going to be mass deportations are going to happen, then you need to take that seriously and not just shrug it off and say, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. So anyways, that's all I got for you today. Let me know what you think about how all this is going to go at our border down below. Is it going to go well? Are we all good? Are we ready for it? What do you think? And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. And with no further ado, have a good day.